In a sign of the vapid, degraded, and pitiful nature of our public discourse, a facile speech, seemingly written by a 15-year-old upon their first encounter with Ayn Rand, has dazzled the world's billionaire class and quite a few way too online fanboys, up to and including their leader, Elon Musk. New Argentine President Javier Milei took a break from banning protests, laying off thousands of workers, and spiking inflation over 200% to come preach the gospel of neoliberalism to the choir at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, of course, annually at Davos, the world elite gathers alongside their political pawns, their media enablers, and grifter wannabes to see what they can do to further extract global wealth, expand their monopolies, and solidify control over world affairs. These deals, which are the real action of the event, occur behind closed doors, while the public face of Davos is a fake do-gooderism where the very people creating many of the problems of the world, from war to hunger to climate catastrophe, wring their hands about these very issues. Apparently, however, even this pretense of benevolence has become too much for the world's billionaire class, judging by the rapturous reception of Javier Milei. World Economic Forum head Klaus Schwab gave Milei a fawning introduction, lauding the, quote, new spirit he had brought to Argentina. This new spirit, by the way, is just the same old neoliberal shock doctrine that the West has long imposed on developing nations. Milei's message to this group can be summed up in 3 words. Greed is good. To governments, get out of the way and let the world's oligarchs extract wealth to their heart's content. To the billionaires, who he described as heroes, keep doing what you're doing. You can see why they loved him so much. Who wouldn't want to hear their vice lauded as virtue?
Therefore, in concluding, I would like to leave a message for all business people here and for those who are not here in person but are following from around the world. Do not be intimidated either by the political class or by parasites who live off the state. Do not surrender to a political class that only wants to stay in power and retain its privileges. You are social benefactors. You're heroes. You're the creators of the most extraordinary period of prosperity we've ever seen. Let no one tell you that your ambition is immoral. If you make money, it's because you offer a better product at a better price, thereby contributing to general well-being. Do not surrender to the advance of the state. The state is not the solution. The state is the problem itself. You are the true protagonists of this story. And rest assured that as from today, Argentina is your staunch, unconditional ally.
Now, his message was both radical and completely supportive of the status quo, because the status quo ideology of the ruler class is, in fact, quite radical. As a politician, he's telling the powerful he will be their lackey. He will strip the power of the state, an imperfect but theoretically democratic institution wherein citizens at least have a shot at exerting influence, and hand it to multinational corporations headed by a short-sighted and self-interested billionaire class. I'm struck by the childlike fairy tale nature of the story he tells and what it says about our infantile rulers that they lap it up like hungry puppy dogs. Milei paints a picture of extraordinary men made wealthy by creating, innovating, designing products to benefit the whole world. When in reality, every year, if you take a look, the most new billionaires come from the finance sector. People who are only skilled at new creative methods of extraction and mathematical trickery, whose innovations are designing new exotic financial instruments like credit default swaps that eventually blow up the entire world economy. In Milei's billionaire bedtime story, there is no such thing as market failures. He says this explicitly. So any and all regulation is both unnecessary and wrong. He specifically argues that even one of the classic examples of market failures, the monopoly, is actually a good thing, not to be messed with. Given the large number of monopolists in attendance, I'm sure this message was like chicken soup for their greedy souls. Anyone, of course, with a basic grasp of reality outside of an imagined libertarian fantasy world can see that this attack on literally all market regulation is insane. Unless, of course, you're a fan of Dickensian-style child labor, indentured servitude, and poisoned food and water. I'm not sure I've ever seen this particular fantasy deflated as quickly as in this infamous clip of Joe Rogan educating Dave Rubin on the need for building codes. Just take a listen.
What problem would you, everything you're building here right now, right? Do you want the government to tell you how to do all these things and all the regulations that you got to have your electric thing this far from this and like all
the regulations like that for construction are important though. You do have to make sure that people don't do stupid shit.
But
make sure
generally,
you don't have a power line that's near a water line. There's a lot of.
But I would put most of that on the builders though. They want to build things that are good. Now I get it.
That's not true. Listen, people
people are going to build
corners all the time. Like, you have to have regulations when it comes to construction methods, or people are going to get fucked.
They cut corners when there are regulations anyway.
They do. They would cut a lot more if there weren't regulations.
I'm not totally.
You go to third world countries and look at construction methods. They're fucking dangerous.
Yeah.
That's why schools collapse on kids in foreign countries sometimes. Listen, man, I was in construction my whole life. My dad's an architect.
Yeah.
I've been in construction since I was a little kid. You fucking need regulations. These guys, a lot of people that are in construction, they'll do whatever the fuck they can to make money. And it's not good for the people that have the house, because they might have that house for 5-10 years before that problem manifests itself. The people who are establishing these codes are licensed builders or people that have been involved in construction for a long fucking time, and they know what's safe and what's not safe. That's why those codes exist. It exists to protect the consumers.
Perfect example there. I could give you thousands of similar instances, from the unregulated Titanic submersible to kids getting sucked into meat grinders, to the Great Depression and the Great Recession, to the old company towns where workers were paid in scrip and forced into permanent debt so they could never leave their brutal jobs until they died from black lung at age 40. And the big picture of no regulation just looks like an acceleration of the absolute worst of what we've got right now. Governments which are even more corrupt and undemocratic, wild inequality, where billionaires construct multi-million-dollar bunkers to escape the apocalypse they are helping to usher in, while the vast majority are locked out of the basics of food, shelter, and healthcare. And a deep moral rot that would place human worth, creativity, and flourishing below the demands of the profit margin and the needs of Milei's billionaire heroes. Now, Milei is, after all, a man who would buy and sell human organs, so he is perfectly willing to literally put a price on humanity. In a particularly nonsensical part of his speech, Milei equates communists, Nazis, fascists, socialists, social democrats, national socialists, Christian Democrats, Keynesians, neo-Keynesians, progressives, populists, nationalists, and globalists, saying, quote, "In the end, there's no substantive difference." The preposterous nature of erasing the clear differences between a very wide range of ideologies goes without saying, unless you are a literal child or a member of the oligarch class, which Milei services. But there's a reason why these elites are so excited to hear all of this and to see moderate reformists like progressives equated with radical evils like Nazism. And it's because they feel themselves under siege by some of these name-checked movements. After all, the greed is good radical libertarianism that Milei espouses, and which had been ascendant in America since Goldwater and forced on much of the rest of the world since Reagan, has been repeatedly rebuked by regular people all around the world. Look at the wellspring of radical, billionaire-friendly market radicalism, the Republican Party itself, and you can see how these ideas have been rejected. In practice, Trump has largely continued the Reagan-like policy of the past, with a few exceptions, but he became the lodestar of American politics by advocating for a clean break from that neoliberal market radical era. Young Americans who have been thoroughly failed by Milei-style market radicalism are even more clear in their rejection of this model. The speech also arrives at a moment when a decisive conflict is brewing between the needs of humanity and the needs of the market and owner class with the advent of super-intelligent AI. It is clear that in this potentially existential battle, Milei's view is to hell with the humans. It is therefore a diseased mind which could, with a straight face, call any of this freedom, as Milei does. Free to work all your days for global monopolists who set all the terms of your exploitation, unless, God forbid, you are unable to work or a robot eliminates your usefulness, and then you are free to quietly die. Don't be fooled into thinking this man is some sort of truth teller or challenge to power. The adoration of the Davos set tells you everything you need to know about who his ideology actually serves, whose freedom it actually preserves. And in that ideology, you are just a liability on a billionaire's balance sheet. And Saagar, it was...
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say to Krystal's monologue, not just this one, all of them, going back to the very beginning, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com.